So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this incredibly exciting masterclass on the disciplinary process. It's a really important part of our business and it's a really important skill to learn. So I'm literally going to take you through how to do it with some real life examples, if you like, towards the end to kind of show you how it's done really and how you can apply it to specific examples. And because the reality is that most of us did not start our business knowing that we'd have to deal with what feels like endless staff challenges. I think sometimes if we can actually recruit them, we then got to manage them, and it often seems, I don't know how you guys feel, but sometimes it feels like our team were put here to test us, and everything in our businesses is a learning curve, and if you can put in place a solid disciplinary process and then follow it, that's half the battle won really. And in this masterclass, I say I'm going to cover some real life examples to help build your confidence, because that will be part of the secret to managing the disciplinary process, and then you'll know that you're confident, hopefully, in dealing with whatever drama your team have got in store for you next. So let's first talk about why having a good disciplinary process is important for your business. First, it ensures fairness and transparency. This means all employees are treated the same way, which helps build trust and makes everyone feel secure. And that's really, really important, particularly I think for a cleaning team, because often they are looking for trust and safety and security. So actually a disciplinary process sounds a bit odd, but actually applying it fairly and equally to everybody just makes them actually feel more protected and secure. Secondly, it protects your business legally, because following proper procedures, it reduces the risk of legal problems and it shows that you respect employment laws. And following a set procedure is one of the key factors in either avoiding or winning an employment tribunal. So if you're going to build a business with a team, knowing how to do this is a really essential skill that you've got to learn. It also helps with team morale. When employees know that issues are handled fairly, it keeps the work environment positive and helps everyone stay focused on actually delivering a great service, which is the most important part of our business. And finally, it provides you with a clear framework for managing staff issues. This means that you've got a step-by-step guide to follow when problems come up, making it easier to handle them consistently, but most importantly, with confidence. So I want to quickly look at the legal framework. We're not going to go into various employment laws in this masterclass, but there's certain things that you need to be aware of. So firstly, obviously, you need to understand some of our employment laws, and they change constantly. And luckily, we have Stuart from Peninsula, I think he's put a post in the members only group today about some changes that potentially are coming. And there's a masterclass in the training library on the changes this year as well. So you need to keep yourself up to date as an employer, because these laws provide the rules for how your employees should be treated at work and what employers need to do when managing disciplinary issues. The key laws that you need to be aware of are the Employment Rights Act, the Equality Act, and the Health and Safety at Work Act. And for me, understanding these laws, it will really help you make sure that your disciplinary process is legal and fair. Secondly, of course, we have to comply with statutory rights. These are the legal rights that all employees have, such as the right to a fair disciplinary process, the right to be accompanied in disciplinary hearings, and protection against unfair dismissal. So following these rights is crucial to avoid legal problems and to show that we respect our employees, and goes back to that team morale and that safety and security. And finally, ACAS, the role of ACAS, and it stands for the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service, and they offer guidance on best practice for managing your disciplinary issues, and they actually provide a code of practice that we can follow. They're actually a fantastic resource for learning about your obligations as an employer. So I really, really recommend that you visit their website. Now, if you have an issue and you contact ACAS, they are quite, how shall we say, favourable to the employee side. However, they are there as a resource for both employers and employees. So, please use them. It's a free service that's provided for us. But also where ACAS can be really helpful, and we've had this in the past, is they can help resolve disputes between employers and employees through conciliation and arbitration, before getting to the legal stage. And actually, if an employee sort of approaches a lawyer to go through an industrial tribunal, they will have to go through ACAS first. Now, they can refuse arbitration, and you can refuse arbitration, but if it ends up in court, the fact that you refuse will actually probably go against you. So use the services that they offer. And my experience of them in terms of arbitration, and we have had this where somebody had approached them, was they were very fair and reasonable, and they listened to everything that we'd done and the process, which is the most important part of this, that we followed, and actually went back to the former employee and said, you have not got a case to go to a tribunal. Your employer has not done anything wrong. It's all been done correctly. So they can be quite helpful, I think.
The same happened when we had them involved, exactly the same. They just sorted it out. And I think we ended up having to pay the employee £20. And we were like, take it, please just take it.
Yeah, they're actually very good.
Can I just ask the one question that gets asked again and again and again? When people have a problem with an employee, a lot of the time they don't want to turn to the disciplinary process. They want to go, well, I'll have an informal chat, or maybe we can sort it out this way. They do everything they can to avoid the disciplinary process. So I know you're about to explain it, but why would I go to the disciplinary process above trying to just have a chat or give them an improvement note or something?
I think you need to, and we're going to talk about types of misconduct. So it might be that some things can be, and part of, if you go onto the ACAS website and their code of practice, part of their steps in terms of the disciplinary process, it can be an informal verbal warning. It can be, so that's sort of a chat with an outcome. But actually, this is just a more formal version of that, where before you have that chat, you're going to investigate, then you're going to have the chat, and then you're going to have in writing a confirmation of that chat. So although it was a verbal warning, you still put it in writing. So it really, you're following this process, even though you don't realize you're doing it. And the whole purpose of making sure you follow the process is, even if it's an informal chat, it's documented and it's confirmed to the employee. So actually that informal chat suddenly becomes a little more serious. This isn't just for written warnings and improvement notices. This should cover everything that you do when you're dealing with an issue with a team member.
Okay, so you'd go to it quite early on.
Yeah, I follow the process. It's just the lightness of the touch that changes. But I'm going to go through a 3-step process. You follow that for everything. Okay, so how to develop a strong disciplinary policy for your business. First, you need to think about misconduct and gross misconduct, and perhaps, think about, so misconduct might just refer to unacceptable behavior or performance that doesn't meet your business standards, whereas gross misconduct is a lot more serious and can include things like theft, violence, or serious breaches of safety protocols. So as an example, a misconduct might be that somebody is a chronic absentee, so they're often, they're off sick one day every week, for example. That would be misconduct, and that would result in a disciplinary process, but it wouldn't necessarily start with gross misconduct, unless perhaps they were off for 2 weeks and hadn't informed you. Just never got in touch for 2 weeks. That potentially could be gross misconduct. Or gross misconduct for us, and it's very specific to cleaning, is if they leave a client early without letting anybody know or giving any reason, because we charge by the hour, so therefore that is theft. So we treat that as gross misconduct. Now, gross misconduct, you have to be careful of this. People often think gross misconduct, instant dismissal. There is no such thing as instant dismissal. If you go straight from you've done something wrong to instant dismissal, you are breaching employment laws. There is no such thing. It might be that when you've gone through the process, you dismiss them, but you can't just literally go, you're fired. You have to go through the process first. It's really important also to establish clear procedures. So you need to set out the steps you'll take when a disciplinary issue arises. And again, this goes back to, first of all, you as a business owner doing everything legally and in a set process, but also in terms of the team member and their security and safety within the work environment, to know what to expect. Now, there's usually 3 steps to a disciplinary process: the initial investigation, a formal meeting. Now, that can be an informal meeting, but usually it's a formal meeting. And then the decision on what action is taken, having done the investigation and held the meeting. And if you've got this clear procedure, again, it just ensures that consistency and fairness in how you handle everything. So also talk about, let's talk about the importance of communication and documentation. So it's great to have that informal chat, but if you do not document in any way, then the next step, when you then have to bring them up, perhaps for the same offence again, the same issue again, you've got nothing that says, we've already spoken about this, haven't we? You need to document it, because then you can present that as part of your evidence that this is persistent behaviour rather than a one-off. And I think what often happens with this informal way of dealing with certain things is like, I'll just have a word. I'll just have another word. Oh no, I didn't document any of that. So now I've got to have just have a word as my first step again. And you've already, this is the third word. Yeah. So documenting even the most informal conversation about an issue is really important. And you don't have to document it as a big red letter with final warning on it. It's just, this is just to confirm this is what we spoke about, and this is what will happen next. Because this documentation is crucial. It helps you keep records of the disciplinary actions, and including the details of any investigations that you've done, the outcomes and decisions that you've made. And this helps you protect your business legally. And, we talked about ACAS and their conciliation and arbitration service. One of the questions that they will ask you is, what process did you follow? What was the lead up to either the dismissal? It's usually a dismissal that results in contact from a previous employee to a tribunal and then ACAS. What process did you follow? Because almost as a business owner, and this is my training in HR, was you can't make a wrong decision, but you can follow the wrong process. So provided you followed the process, your decision is yours to make. But if you didn't follow the process, then your decision cannot be evidence to be on secure grounds, if that makes sense. Now, the good news is there's already a full disciplinary policy in member documents. So all you need to do is read through it, make sure you understand it, and just add it to your policy documents that you issue to your team. These are incorporated for us in our staff handbook. So you might want to add it to your staff handbook, or you can send it out with a contract, or you can, if you're introducing it, or, if you just want to do it separately, you can do it separately. But it's already there for you. It sets out the whole process. It sets out in what will happen with investigations, any pre-disciplinary discussions, written warnings, and the dismissal itself. And it sets out what is gross misconduct and how appeals will be handled. And I will cover appeals a little bit later. It's in a really easy to read and follow format. So just use this as a basis for yours, amend it. Anybody already downloaded it? Give me a wave. I can sort of see you. Yeah, a few of you. Brilliant. If you haven't, it's really good policy there, all written for you. So if you haven't already got one that's better, then this is the one to use.
I will be downloading it.
Fantastic. Okay, so I want to look now at the actual steps involved in the disciplinary process and how to navigate them effectively. And when I've gone through these 3 steps, I'm then going to do some real life examples for you. So first of all, we have the investigation stage. So this is the gathering evidence phase. It's really critical because thorough preparation and planning for the next stage is really key here. You need to gather all the relevant information, records that you've kept, witness statements, documentation, and any other evidence related to the alleged misconduct. And bit like with the law, innocent until proven guilty. At this stage, it's alleged misconduct. Even if you saw them do it, it's still alleged misconduct. Because proper planning makes sure that the investigation goes smoothly, all necessary information is collected, and it's also important to assess the evidence carefully to make sure it's really credible and relevant to the actual disciplinary issue. And it might be where you gather a load of evidence, and especially witness statements as an example, and actually go, this is not relevant to the issue. So that gets discarded at this stage. It's really important that what you take forward from the investigation stage is the pertinent information that you're going to need for the next stage. You're going to need to check witness credibility, actually look at if there's physical evidence, actually look at that. And also it's a good chance at this stage to look at your relevant policies and procedures, so that, assuming you have them in place, and you will have after this, but look at your relevant policies and procedures and look where the breach might have happened. So assuming that you provide these policies and procedures to your team, and there's an issue with misconduct, you can look at the misconduct that they're accused of, and then are they breaching your policies and procedures? It's really important at this stage, because this is your preparation and if you like, arming yourself for the disciplinary meeting stroke hearing, which is the next stage of the wonderful disciplinary process. So you've got the evidence. So now you have to have a disciplinary meeting or hearing. Now, mostly in lawyer terms, it's called hearing, but that can sometimes be a little bit scary for team members. And strangely enough, you don't want them to feel overwhelmed by this disciplinary process. So we tend to call it both in our communication. The legal term is hearing. Louise?
We call it an interview or an investigation.
Yeah. So it's just because we're very mindful that we're dealing with people, and we're often dealing with people, if we're talking about our cleaning team, we're often dealing with people that might be scared of authority and they'll be very nervous about this. So yeah, just call it whatever you like, but be aware in the writing that it needs to be very clear what the meeting, hearing, investigation, interview is about, because it's not the actual investigation. You've already done that. Louise?
So if you didn't have premises, where would you hold this?
If I didn't have premises, I would either do it in the employee's own home, if that's appropriate. You're pulling your face.
I don't know if I do it in their own home.
Well, what I would want to do with this is to be doing it in a comfortable environment, and it would very much depend on the employee. Or you can just hire a meeting room for an hour. It's not expensive nowadays to do something like that. I would not do it in a Costa Coffee type environment. Definitely not. And I wouldn't invite them to your home.
But you could do this over the phone, couldn't you?
Yeah, I prefer to do them face to face. And in terms of them bringing somebody with them and that sort of thing, because I'm going to talk about that shortly, they have the right to bring somebody with them. And that's very difficult to do on the phone. You could do them over Zoom. We've actually done a disciplinary meeting with somebody attending over Zoom. So that is an option.
Okay.
Okay, so the disciplinary meeting, whatever you call it, and however you do it, this is the opportunity for you to present your evidence, but also for the employee to respond to the allegations and present their side of the story. Now, there should be a real structure and flow to the meeting, so that's why you need to carefully plan it to make sure it's fair and transparent. And different roles are assigned during the meeting. You should have a chairperson, so that should be probably you. Maybe you might have some HR support there with you, but you might not if you're a sole owner business. The HR representative can be there to give you guidance and support. And also, of course, the employee themselves might have somebody to come along with them, or they might have a union representative with them. And you have to give them, as part of the invitation to this meeting, and there's a document that's already there for you ready, you have to offer them the option of having somebody with them. And it's really important that this is, yes, it's about presenting your information, but it's also about asking questions and actively listening to what's being fed back to you, because that's really how you can get to a decision. Because otherwise, especially if you ended up in a tribunal or in arbitration with ACAS, if you didn't give the opportunity for the employee to share their side of the story, and you didn't consider that as part of your decision, then you could potentially be short-circuiting the disciplinary process, and really you made your mind up at the investigation stage. And you can't have made your mind up at the investigation stage. You have to show that you have actually investigated, then had the meeting before making the decision.
So I always start this quite informally. We normally start with you're invited in. Obviously, you've seen the invite, and this is what we'd like to talk to you about. You've seen the evidence that we've got, or we'll hand them the evidence, and then go, but this is your chance to explain your side of the story. So from your point of view, what's happened? And really, that's all you have to do to cover it, because then it's just a conversation from there.
Absolutely. And it's about putting them at their ease, because even if you do end up sacking them, you don't really want it to be a really antagonistic process. It needs to be a sort of a proper process, but fair and sort of just not comforting. That's the wrong word, but it needs to be a safe environment for them to feel that they're supported, I suppose. And as I said, there is already a letter in the document templates that basically inviting them to a disciplinary meeting. So it's already there for you. You can just copy and use that one and just change the dates and obviously the people that you're sending it to, and obviously put your own logo on it or your own letterhead. So then the last step of the disciplinary process is your decision. This is probably the most critical stage. You evaluate the evidence collected when you were investigating, and you weigh the mitigating factors that might be present and that have come out from the meeting. You must be fair and proportionate based on the findings of the investigation and your own policies and procedures to make sure that that they're sort of brought into, but you brought those in as part of the investigation. And then when you've made the decision, no matter what it is, you should communicate that clearly to the employee, along with any feedback or guidance for improvement, because it might not, and I hope not, most disciplinaries don't result in dismissal. Most disciplinaries result in feedback or guidance or retraining or like an improvement notice as an example. But transparency and clarity are really essential to make sure that the employee understands the decision and the reasons behind it. And often, rather than going straight to a written decision, which we do give them, we will often talk to them and let them know the outcome before they get it in writing, so that we can be sure that they've understood it and they know what the next steps are. And then when they get it in writing, it's just a confirmation, and it's actually a bit less scary for them as well. Okay, so now we've got some real life examples that might result in disciplinary action. There's probably the 7 main ones here. I think, Louise, you've got another one, haven't you, about driving that resulted in a disciplinary. Do you want to share?
Oh, we had someone was driving for us and he hit the back of a cyclist. He literally drove into a cyclist, and we were like, yeah, that's not great. And he was like, it's a cyclist's fault. And we were like, no, we're going straight for disciplinary. We're going to do a full investigation into this. How on the roundabout did you hit a cyclist? And actually it concluded in he was no longer allowed to be a driver for us. But that's not a common one.
I think the only one that I've not done on that list is substance abuse. I have had somebody turn up for interview drunk once, but I've never actually had to handle a disciplinary for substance abuse. But yeah, they're the sort of most common ones that we come across on a daily basis. Or probably not daily, but on a fairly regular basis. So how would you follow the disciplinary process for someone who's constantly calling in sick? Let's just work the example. So step 1, you investigate. Do you keep attendance records? These are essential if you're going to manage absenteeism. I know, Louise, you use the Bradford factor. It's great because it doesn't just measure absences, it measures the effect it has on the business. For example, a long absence of 3 weeks could actually have less effect on the business in terms of last minute changes and cancellations than 1 day off sick every week for 3 weeks, which is actually more disruptive in a way. In my business, we use a percentage, and we have a set target of 95% attendance for all team members. And if they fall below that, we use the disciplinary process to manage it. So as part of your investigation as well, are there any trends or patterns in the employee's attendance? For example, we don't actually work Mondays anymore, but is there somebody that's always off on a Tuesday after a bank holiday? They have a long weekend, as an example, or actually maybe they have Monday-itis, or maybe Fridays are their preferred day. Are there some patterns? As part of your investigation, if you can spot some patterns, that's a point of discussion for the meeting. And also document. Sorry,
the pattern that we see an awful lot is I couldn't call in till after 8 o'clock because my child was suddenly sick at 8 o'clock, and that happened 6 times in a row. And you go, are they always sick on the dot of 8 o'clock?
Often hours seem to be on the way to school when the child becomes sick.
Yeah.
And also in the investigation stage here, it's important to document the negative impact that the employee's poor attendance has had on the business. If you've had to cancel clients or increase the workload for other employees, or you've had complaints from clients because of absenteeism, document this, because this is going to be used in the meeting to present to the employee. And also, as part of the investigation, do you make your employees aware, and have they acknowledged your attendance policy if you have one? Now, this might include signing a document stating that they understand the expectations regarding attendance and the consequences of poor attendance. We have this included in our staff handbook. It's probably a good document to add to our documents. It's not in there yet, but actually after this, I'll add it in there for you. And if you do back to work interviews, and I recommend you do a back to work interview for every single absence, even if it's only a I couldn't come in, and I came in sort of at 1 o'clock or something and just did one client for you. You need to, it's not a really formal thing. It could be, that can be definitely done on the telephone, but you need to be documenting it, because when you're building a pattern here, and absenteeism, often we put up with it for a long time before it just becomes too much, and then we go with the disciplinary process. But if you're using back to work interviews as an example and documenting and noticing, and they know you're noticing every absence, then first of all, it helps manage it and actually reduces absenteeism, but it's also part of your sort of arsenal of things that you're going to use at the meeting to make sure this employee understands what's actually happening here. So you've got your evidence gathered, now the actual disciplinary meetings. And I always start by clearly outlining why we're having the meeting and the roles of those attending. And if they brought someone with them, which is, as is their right, what I do also is clearly set out what that person's role is, because they can advise and they can ask questions, but they cannot speak on behalf of the employee. You can let them if you want to, but you don't by law have to let them speak on the employee's behalf, because again, in terms of the next stage, if this ever went into a legal situation, it wants to be clear that the employee has had the opportunity to speak. So next,
can I add something to this? So the people that we're really strict on who they can bring in with them, so they can only bring a union representative or be accompanied by someone else in the business. We will not let them bring in friends and family, because we did it once. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, they can end up talking over, and yeah, they don't understand the importance, or they start ranting at you about something that's completely irrelevant. Okay, so the next thing is, in the meeting, you want to actually review the employee's attendance record. So you'll be highlighting the instances of absences, lateness, or patterns that you've identified as your investigation. And you should have the dates, the times, and the duration all as documented in your attendance records. Then you're going to remind them of the attendance policy, which you showed them when they started, or you're going to show them after this video, including the expectations regarding punctuality, reporting procedures, because that's really important to make sure they're reporting in the right way. And as Louise said, before 8 o'clock is definitely in our policies. And then the consequences for non-compliance. Ensure that the employee understands the policy and its importance to the organisation. Okay, then you can discuss the impact that the poor attendance had on the team or on the company or on clients. Don't mention individual clients or individual team members, though. This is really important. But you've investigated this. You now have got this documented, the impact that it had. Then it's time for the employee to explain the reasons for their absences. Listen and consider any valid reasons or mitigating circumstances that may have contributed to the poor attendance. Ask questions, dig a little deeper if you need to, and find out if there's support that can be offered. There might be health issues, them or their family members. There might be family emergencies, or they might have transportation difficulties. It's important to know why these absences are happening. And also, if there have been previous discussions, so maybe you've had that informal chat and then documented it, or they've already had a warning for their attendance or performance evaluations related to attendance issues, you need to reinforce the importance of addressing these concerns and the consequences by referring back to what's happened before. Because this is, again, you need to have this discussion with them, because if the ultimate decision is you dismiss them, they need to have had the opportunity to show you why this isn't the same pattern carrying on, if that makes sense. And then the final step, it's the decision. You literally are going to communicate the expectations. And for me, I love an improvement notice when it comes to attendance. They work brilliantly for this, because you can literally set out specific goals and targets for improving their attendance, outline the consequences for failing to meet these expectations, which might include further disciplinary action. Perhaps, you can, as part of this process, you'll offer support and assistance if, that the employee needs help to improve their attendance. But usually, in my experience, the more you help, the worse it seems to get. If they've got a complicated family life that is impacting, as an example, on their attendance, there's not anything you could do about that. You can support them at work, but that's about all you can do. You also need to, as part of this decision-making process, is you get agreement from the employee on the proposed action plan for improving attendance. You document the outcomes of the meeting, agree the actions, targets, and timelines for improvement, and then you also schedule a follow-up meeting to review their progress and provide ongoing support and guidance as needed. Now, we monitor all our team's attendance anyway, but if you're closely monitoring, you should know at what stage is everything going okay. A couple of weeks later, a month after that. So it's, you need to set your own timescales, but you do need to schedule those follow-ups with them and document everything that you've agreed, all the discussions and the action plans that you've gone through as part of this process. And that means that you've got a record, and if you've offered support to the employee for whatever reason, then that can be documented as well. And as I said, for a first disciplinary on attendance, I'm a big fan of an improvement notice. It's actually really a written warning, but it sets out clear expectations, what improvement looks like over a good timescale, and there's a template in member documents you can use. So you've got one there already set out for you specifically for attendance. So we'll have a quickly look at another one, which is quality of work, because this is often one that comes up where it's just like they're just not getting it, or the quality of work has dropped for whatever reason. You need to handle that as part of the disciplinary process, but you literally follow the same process. You investigate. Okay, so what training records do you have? Have they received adequate training on how to perform their task to the required standard? Lack of training or ongoing support lack of ongoing support might contribute to their quality of work. So it might actually be that part of your investigation, you realise that it might be a training issue. If there are complaints or poor feedback about their work, have you documented them? It might be that they're not completing a job to, not finishing it, if that makes sense, or it might be that they're finishing it to a poor standard or dissatisfaction with the level of service that's provided generally. Do you have quality control checks? Do you do inspections to assess the quality of the employee's work? Remember your evidence gathering here. If you're going to speak to their colleagues or supervisors who've observed the employee's work firsthand, they might give you insights into where the employee is struggling or failing to meet the expectations. Again, this is evidence gathering. Document any errors, mistakes, or incidents of having to maybe go back to a client, as an example, to redo some work. This should all be included in your evidence. And that if they're failing to follow instructions, for example, this is all part of the evidence gathering.
Can I say with that, the other things I would add to that is if you've got any photos, use photos and timesheet records as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next step is the meeting. Again, it's the same process. Outline why you're there and what the roles of the people are that are attending. Look at specific instances of poor quality work, and this is where your evidence of your photographs before and after, or photographs, usually the photographs come from a client to say, look, they missed a bit. Areas where the employee performance has fallen short of expectations. So we have, as part of our quality check system, we fill out a Google form and we score it. And so part of that is, when they're having poor scores, is that comes into this meeting as part of the evidence. Discuss the impact that the employee's poor quality of work has had on the team and the business. Reinforce your expectations and standard regarding work quality, and then let the employee explain any factors or challenges that might have contributed to their poor quality of work. So you can see it's exactly the same process for attendance and quality of work and everything else. This is the same process for the meeting. And then if they've had previous warnings or discussions about their performance, this gets brought into the meeting and they're given an opportunity to let you know why this isn't related and it's not just, them carrying on with the same issue. And this is just a really good process that works for anything. And then decision making. So communicate the expectations for improvement moving forward, specific goals or targets for improving the quality of their work. If out of the discussion in the meeting, it's been decided actually they need some more training or more resources or more support provided, well, you can outline this as part of your decision that this is what will be provided. And maybe this is what the thing that you'll go to. Sometimes I think we let quality of work build up to be a big problem, whereas if we addressed it in this sort of process but in a really quick way, then it doesn't let it build up quite so badly, I don't think. And again, schedule regular follow-up meetings to monitor their progress, provide ongoing support and feedback, document the outcomes, any agreed action plans, goals, training, timelines for improvement. It's exactly the same process for every single issue that you've got. So hopefully, you've got 5 other issues on there. You might have other issues that come up. But if you just literally follow that 3-step process, that will guide you straight through. So it's gather your evidence, have the meeting, make the decision. It's honestly, it's as simple as that if you just apply this every single time. Quickly before I finish, I want to briefly mention the right to appeal your decision, because it's a really important last step in the process. And also during the meeting, other issues might have arisen as a potential grievance from the employee. So I'm just going to cover those off very briefly. So when you document your decision at the 3rd step of the process, it's really important to let them know how, who, and by when they have the right to appeal your decision. It's a really important part of the process because it safeguards their opportunity to challenge your disciplinary decisions. The biggest challenge as a solo business owner is it's really hard to be impartial, because effectively they'll be appealing to you about your decision. But actually, if it's not a dismissal, it can be handled that way. All you do is you have a second meeting to discuss if there is further evidence or mitigating circumstances that weren't discussed in the first meeting. And then you go back to the decision stage and either reconfirm or change the decision based on the new evidence or circumstances. If your decision is a dismissal, my recommendation, this is just from experience, is if they appeal, then I would set up a meeting with an external HR consultant to support me. That's just my personal preference. You might still want to feel confident to go ahead, but I've used it a couple of times in the past, and it's just been really helpful. Just pay for a couple of hours of somebody's time to hold the meeting. I still attended and was part of the meeting, but they held the meeting, and it made the process a little bit more impartial.
Can I say on this, on my experience? So we've had a couple of people try to go to appeals, to which we say, okay, you show us the new evidence. Never once have they introduced any new evidence. Therefore, it's never actually gone to appeal. So don't be afraid when people say, I'm going to appeal. The main thing is they have to appeal to you. So they cannot take you to tribunal unless they've gone through the appeals process. And the only way it can happen is if there's new evidence, which there very rarely is.
And if there is no new evidence and no new mitigating circumstances, it doesn't matter who holds the appeal, it can't be upheld, can it?
So that's why the procedure matters. And so it's all about technicalities here. So appeals, it's a very interesting one.
Now, just finally on grievances, if a grievance is raised, so this is basically them complaining about something that you or the business has done or somebody else has done. If that's raised during the disciplinary meeting, it's important that it's addressed because it could cause you issues later. Now, if it's directly related to the original issue, you can pretty much put your decision on hold and then follow the grievance process on the grievance because they're related and you'll need to put that on hold. But if it's a completely separate matter and completely unrelated to the misconduct, then, or maybe it involves another team member or a supervisor, you'll need to handle it completely separately from the disciplinary process. So the disciplinary process goes through to its final, it finishes, and then you do the grievance process separately. But if they're linked, I like to put the disciplinary on hold and then do the grievance and then go back to the disciplinary and see if that affected the decision, if that makes sense. And the good news, there's a grievance and dispute policy and member documents.
Is that making sense to everyone about the grievance? Everyone's looking quite blank, like grievance as well as appeals.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Yeah, grievance is just their chance to, complain about you. So, yeah, you've got to handle it. But the policy's there. Again, it's really clearly laid out for you. It's provided by an HR consultant. So it's all up to date and it's there ready to use in your business. So, if you haven't already put these policies in place, there you go. They're in member documents for you. If your team member have never seen these documents, then you need to make sure that they see them and they sign to say that they've received them, because this is an important part of making them feel safe and secure and that you're going to apply things fairly, whether it's a disciplinary or them having a grievance against you or the business. And that's it really. I'm not going to go into handling grievances in any more detail because it would be a really exciting another masterclass, but it gives you enough information there in the policy. And actually, if you think of it the same as a disciplinary process, investigate, have a meeting, make a decision. It's the same process, really, whether it's disciplinary or a grievance. And that's it. Hopefully, might have made you a little bit more confident with the disciplinary process.